Hello and welcome to She the People Small Screen Fest powered by Colors. Through this festival, it is our endeavor to trace how the small screen is changing and influencing how we consume content. Our panel titled Writing Your Own Stories, we have two wonderful people who started as journalists, turned into full time authors, and now into screenwriting and much more. They are two people who have got their hand on the pulse as far as the screenwriting and the OTT and world is concerned. We discuss with them about their journeys. First up, we have with us Naomi Datta, who is a former broadcast journalist and television anchor. She has worked with CNBC TV 18, Times Now, MTV, and Demol. Currently, Naomi is a freelance creative consultant and has worked on Netflix's properties like The Fabulous Lives of Bollywood Wives. She's also a novelist and has two books out with Penguin Random House, The 6 p.m. Slot and How to Be a Likeable Bigot. We also have with us Meghna Pant. Meghna is a multiple award-winning and best-selling author, screenwriter, journalist, and speaker. She has been felicitated with various honors for distinguished contribution to literature, gender issues, and journalism, including the Bharat Nirman Award, Frank O'Connor International Award, Commonwealth Short Stories Prize, and Lively Media Award. She has published 8 books, including the upcoming Boys Don't Cry. I welcome both of you to Small Screen Fest. I'll come
Thanks,
to you,
Thanks,
Meghna.
Deepshikha.
Deepshikha.
I'll come to you first, Meghna. You began as a journalist and then into writing full-length novels and now into screenwriting. How has it changed you as a writer?
Deepshikha, movies are very visual, right? And books are very sensory. So they're two very, very different, very disparate and separate mediums. So for me, the writing journey has been very interesting because I started out as a business journalist, as you just mentioned. I was an editor of a business magazine in Dubai, and then I became a full-time writer. So I've written across genres from novels to short stories to non-fiction. Shelley and I, in fact, wrote Feminist Rani together. And I've also written now screenplays. So it's been quite an adventurous ride. Publishers have no idea what to do with me because most contemporary writers in India only stick to one genre, and here I am writing across genres. But screenplay and book, it's been a very interesting transformation because, of course, they share the same elements of writing in terms of having a riveting sort of main plot or narrative arc, or the crux of the story has to be very interesting, and it has to have your beginning, middle, and end, and it has to have very interesting main characters. But in novels, I have found in my personal experience that you can break the rules of writing, right? So in a screenplay, for example, you have to take your character from point A to point B, and it has to be in some sort of logical, rational, and even conclusive way. But in books, you don't have to do that. So I feel like my understanding and my experience of it, screenplays are more about showing, and novels are more about feelings. And one more thing I found very different is the process by which it comes about. So books need only one person, right? The author, in order to work. But for movie adaptations, you need many people to come together in order for it to work. So you've got your director, you've got your writer, you've got your producer, actor, your marketing and distribution person, your art director, your costume designer. And the thing is, everybody on that team has to have a common vision, which will take the pitch of the story forward together as as a concrete thing. And that's the only way the story will translate well to the audience. So even the process of books versus screenplays have been very different, which is why a lot of authors, even if they write good screenplays, can't work in the film industry because it requires a very different skill set as a writer. And I'm sure you've seen this up close so much, right? Much more than even I have.
Right. So, Naomi, would you like to add something to that?
So I completely actually agree with the Meghna on that point that when you're writing a book, it's really actually the romantic notion of the the artist, the novelist as the creator as an artist working on their own and all of that. At least while you're writing the book, it feels like that because it's your baby. It's just you. You know where it's going. Of course, once you send it for publication, your publisher has a view on it. Then there's marketing, distribution, all of that comes in. But yeah, I think like Meghna said, when you're writing a book, it is more or less it's your project. But when it comes to creating something which is commissioned for an OTT, or if it's commissioned for even a JC, there's so many people and so many factors that come into it that it can be really intimidating actually. And at the end of the day, it's very collaborative. So how much of it is yours is, like Meghna said, it's tough to say, you know. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's I mean, I pretty much endorse what she's saying.
So, Naomi, I would like to ask you, going forward, do you think there are going to be what kind of stories are the ones that are most going to interest people the most?
Deepshika, I wish I knew the formula, because then I would be making a lot of money and I would be in great demand with all the channels, because they would come running to me and say, Naomi, since you have figured out the pulse of the audience, we need you. And I would be laughing my way to the bank. So there is no set, there is no set formula at all. Okay. I mean, the kind of things which are working, like let me give you an international example actually. Like, last year one of the biggest hits was Bridgerton, on Netflix, okay, which is historical fiction and uh, basically a romance, which people have said, oh, people don't want to watch romances and it's boring and all of that. But look at the big hit it was, because they were very smart. They took historical fiction, but they also tweaked it, so they made it quite woke, which is they put in diversity. And at the same time, we have been living now for 2 years with the pandemic. So I really think people don't want to see the pandemic on screen. They would like to see an era where there were no masks, there was no social distancing, and things were easier. So, I mean, for me, I think that's why you're not seeing like the pandemic being reflected too much in the storytelling that we're doing, because I don't think people want to see that. So then it's easier to see like something like his. I don't think we've done historical fiction in India, in the local market. We haven't done historical fiction, and if you ask me, that's a big thing. We should be able to do it. We haven't done it yet. So to come to your question, I think basically at the end of the day, and it sounds very easy, but it's very tough to crack. You need to have a good story. You need to have a good set of relatable characters. You need to have characters that people invest in. And then it doesn't matter what the genre is, like I don't think there can be things like Abhi only science fiction is working. Right now only romance is working. There's no such thing. I think at the end of the day, you just have to tell a good story. And what is that good story? You, as a creator, you always think you're telling a good story, but the audience decides.
Yeah, so here, there's a question that comes to my mind, and I like you both of your opinions on that. Even if it's a good story, how important it is to, have a gendered lens, give voice to a woman character, or give voice to any character for that matter, from a gender
So,
I
point of view.
Naomi, I don't know about you, but I've felt like we've done a great disservice to feminism, at least in our films, because we've gone from Abla Nari to straight away Krantikari. So, like women are just constantly being put into these stereotypes, and these so called feminist films are so pedantic. They're just ticking all these boxes without any meaningful conversation. They're making women seem inaccessible, and they're doing worse than what the 1980s, did to the image of women through films. Because now you've gone from, like, if a woman is emancipated or powerful, even for Game of Thrones, right? The reason we hated the end is because Khaleesi, her narrative arc started off so beautifully as a woman of courage, of strength and power, and then you turn her into a crazy woman because she has power. So, matlab, even a show like that, I had such a problem with the end of that show because of this very reason. And even in our cinema, which if you show a emancipated woman, she has to be smoking, she has to be like sleeping around. Or why are we further them labeling women when we're trying to break away from those labels? So we're not showing, like Tumhari Sulu, for example, was a rare film which showed an emancipated woman in a normal fashion. Because honestly, feminism is about people like you and me, and everyday women doing something thoda hatke or exercising an agency. We're not like badasses or krantikaris in the typical sense. Like, I wish we'd break away from these stereotypes. And because films are such a large medium, I think we need to normalize strong women and take it forward. Like Tumhari Sulu, for example, had done. I think that was beautiful. Or even Thappad, right? So
Hmm.
nuance. So when you see female characters like that, then it makes sense to talk about feminism. But some, I'm not going to name the films, which ones I'm talking about, but they have done a great disservice in the name of feminism, honestly.
Dipshika, actually, Meghna and I had this long conversation, and I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell
Yeah.
you which film it was, but we both
Yeah.
had a very impassioned conversation on the same thing. That first we had this, we had the stereotype of the very ideal Bharatiya Nari who did nothing
Sati
wrong. There was a
Savitri.
paragon.
Yeah.
Yeah, who was a paragon of virtue. Ye wo. Then there was some clever subverting of that stereotype, and you came up with this spunky small town girl, who was living life on her own terms, and it was very
Yeah.
refreshing to
Yeah.
begin with. But then the stereotype only became, I mean, I'm sorry, the breaking of the stereotype only became a
Became a
stereotype. So now,
stereotype. Exactly.
yeah, so
Yeah.
every second movie then became about the small town girl stereotype, and you would think that girls in small towns basically do not have any ambition, they do not have any career
Yeah.
plans. All they do is behave like badly behaved men.
Yeah.
So you had this. You just had this sort of gender sort of what is it called, reverse engineering or whatever, and you basically
Yeah.
had women behaving like badly behaved men, and they were like, oh my god, this is so spunky, this is so feisty, this is so
Yeah.
great. And after a bit, like first movie it was great, second movie acha
Yeah.
okay, third movie I'm like, okay, what is going on? Like, do these women not have careers? Do these women not
Yeah.
have ambitions? Are they only going to be moofat and spunky? And so I think that becomes a problem in the industry also, that they break the rut, then that only becomes the rut. So yeah, so in films
Yeah.
actually, I do think there is a
I
crisis
agree.
of sort in characterization. Yeah.
Yeah. So, my next question is to you only, Naomi, and it's about we saw a lot of Western storylines being copied or music being copied, and now we know when Western shows or shows across the world are getting which have been popular are getting adapted for the Indian television for the OTT, and you've been part of some of them. So, tell us about this 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 journey as how do you go about making it more real, more relatable to the Indian audiences?
I don't have too much. I won't be able to talk to you too much about television because, especially because I've worked more in niche television, and now I'm
Hmm.
working with OTT.
OTT.
But yeah, I'm working with OTT. So the thing is that when all these OTT platforms launched, because of their viewership and the numbers that they had, and because of the global hits, so to say, that they had, there was a lot of enthusiasm. Everyone thought ki, chalo, now let's go make global content also. We will make global hits, and 190 countries will watch us. But I think sometimes you forget that you have to work in your local market first, you have to work in your core market first. And then after that, if there is a spillover, if there's a global market which comes in, great. But your primary focus always has to be a local market. And I think it's taken some time for platforms to get that right, because see, India is a very complex market. It's not a homogeneous market at all. So it's very difficult to get it right, that you cannot find that one product which everyone likes, because region wise we like different things. So it's very difficult. And I think what we need to do, just one second, this fell. I think what we need to do is we have to look at the example of a country like South Korea, which is very unabashedly local in its storytelling. Like if you look at K drama, which like I'm not a very big fan of, but I know people who are crazy about it. So if you look at K drama, you look at what that industry does, they're very local in their storytelling, and they don't try to appeal to to everyone. They're making stories which relate to them, and yet they have spillover, and yet it works everywhere else, and yet you have people who are like big fans of that country. And it's so I think we need to do that here as well. And finally, what will work are things which are relatable to your local core audience. And I think things which have worked are also very, if you look at, like, you look at Panchayat, on
Yeah.
Amazon Prime, or you look at Family Man, or you look at things which have worked on Netflix also, like Sacred Game, whatever. They have a very Indian flavor. So nothing
Yeah.
which is a ripoff has worked, because finally at the end of the day, the sensibilities have to be Indian. The only thing is, on an OTT platform, you can be grittier. You can be, you don't have to be that careful. So I think more or less they are getting that local flavor, but there will be hits and misses because it's still an evolving market.
Right. So, and this is a question to both of you. As writers, do you think writers are becoming more conscious about the casting?
Meghna?
I don't know. So I've had what two of my Boys Don't Cry and the terrible, horrible good news that got picked up. Uh, for both, I was asked who would you ideally like to see, because see, as a writer, you have already imagined a world, right? And when you're pitching it to films, you also imagine that world with actors in it, like who will be most who well placed to play a certain character. So you're asked for your opinion, but I think Naomi will tell you that. I think the casting director, the producer, they obviously get a much higher say in all of this, right? In the casting,
Yeah.
from what I've
Also, I
understood.
think
They'll very politely
Meghna
ask you for
kind.
your opinion, but then they'll do what works.
I think Meghna kind of addressed it in her first answer itself, where she told you that when you start writing for screen, or when you do something for another platform as opposed to a book, it's everybody's
Yeah,
baby. So there's
yeah.
a creative vision which comes in. It becomes very collaborative. So I'm sure your opinion is sought, but finally it boils down to so many factors.
So many factors.
So
Also, availability of
that's
the
how it
actor
works.
and whether the story
Yeah,
resonates with
yeah.
them. Yeah,
I mean, everybody has a certain notion of who they would want, but finally, like Meghna has said before, it's very collaborative.
So,
absolutely.
when something you feel that it should have worked and it was very interesting or refreshing and doesn't work, uh, ultimately, so how do you respond to that as a writer to come out of that?
Something you have created, or something that
Something you
is
have created. Something you have created.
See, I have not really come out with a fiction show as such. They have been, of course, made non-fiction shows, and some of them have done well. Some of them have been outright flops. But I think, I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but I think more or less when you're working on a product and then it's reaching the finishing line, you know that whether it's going to work or not work. Like, I've never been very surprised if something has not worked, because you do have an instinct about these things. Um so i i feel like, like, if you're talking about books, then sure, when my first book came out, I thought it was going to take the world by storm. But it didn't. But that's with every first book and every
That's with
novelist. You
every
think
debut
you're going to,
author.
yeah, you think you're going to be a literary sensation, and people are going to say, where was this writer hiding all this while? And but so that happens. But with shows, like, again, coming back to the same point that Meghna's made, because it's so collaborative, because the
Yeah.
ownership is so divided, or let's say it's so joint, that you can't control a lot of things over it, and you pretty much know what's going to click.
I think also as
And
a
so,
writer, at least, yeah,
yeah.
as a writer, I feel like we've also developed a pretty thick skin. Like even in publishing, you can't shine your mirror until you rub it hard, right? So you have to get used to criticism, whether it's constructive or not, and you have to be smart enough to know the difference between the two. And I think that's what takes your craft forward. If you sit and start crying at the first rejection letter you get, or the first, criticism of your work, then you'll never be able to write again. So one thing I found really helps is workshopping. And trust me, as a writer, I have such a thick skin. I know I'm supposed to be a very sensitive human being because I'm a creative person, but I have a very thick skin. Also, I think being a woman on social media makes you thick skinned anyway. The amount
Yeah.
I've got trolled in my initial years, I have developed. I literally, I don't even notice now, even in my real life, if somebody's saying nasty things about me, it's just like, just washes through. So it's a great defense mechanism, I guess, to have built, especially as a female writer. But you have to also be smart to know that when there's good criticism coming your way, something that can improve
Yeah.
your craft and your story, like especially in screenplay writing, there's so many people coming on board and giving you feedback on the writing, the dialogues, कि character को ये करना चाहिए, वो करना चाहिए. And if you think that will help take the story forward and make your movie stronger, then please embrace it. Please be open to change. And have found all publishers, all directors, all producers complaining about writers because they refuse to listen. They refuse to accept
Hmm.
feedback. They're so
Hmm.
egoistic about
Hmm.
their work, it's so sensitive that nobody can say anything to them. But then you can't work in films because you really have to be thick skinned, and you also have to be open minded enough to know ki, we're in this together. We all have a common vision. So let's polish this screenplay to the best version of itself. And that can only be done when the writer is willing to accept feedback and then improve upon the story. So please, as a writer, if you're looking at that, please, develop the sense and the sensibility, and do away with the sensitivity, I would say.
Right,
Yeah, so
absolutely.
I used to work with a movie studio, Deepshikha, and the same point. I was not a writer those days, but we would read scripts, and you could tell what was wrong with the script and where
Yeah,
it's not going to work. But it's very difficult to get through to writers, and I know that when you write yourself, you're also very sensitive to criticism, and a lot of times you think, "What do these people know?" So it's very tough.
Yeah.
Like you got to somehow, like Meghna said, you have to figure out what is constructive criticism, what is just random stuff, like a lot of stuff that you read on Twitter after a product is out is just people trying to be snarky for traction, because outrage works a lot on Twitter, I should know. So if you rant about something, it works a lot, so sometimes you don't need to take that seriously at all. And you can differentiate between what's good constructive criticism and what is just people taking you
yeah.
out.
I
Yeah.
think opinions are like armpits, like, right? Everybody has them, so you have to kind of discount it after a while. Like I remember, whenever Arundhati Roy's book will come out, people will comment on the shade of her lipstick or the color of, the hair color that she's used and what she's wearing. Instead of, she's faced a lot of that, and as female writers, I feel like particularly. I remember I went to a lit fest, and this male writer who claims to be a feminist online, to my face, he had the guts to say कि यार female writers have it so easy. तुम बस थोड़ा लिपस्टिक पहन लो और तुम्हारी किताबें बिक जाएंगी. And that reality, I mean, forget the stupidity of that comment, but the reality is that female authors get lower advances, they get lower marketing budgets, they get fewer awards. Of course, now in the last couple of years, things have advanced forward and we're seeing more female voices out there. But it's taken a very long time to get here, and slowly we're changing, but we still have a very long way to go, I think.
Yeah, I'll quickly plug the She the People's Women Writers Prize also here because that's going to come out soon, and this will be
That's
the
such a
first.
smart thing. I'm so glad you guys are doing this, by the way. It's phenomenal.
So, and this is my next question is about the content we have on screen, even films. Do you think we are moving away from our happy ending need for happy endings now? And
I don't think so, because I really want things to end well, at least in the movies. So I would always want that as an audience. But I do think that it's become more realistic, and it's become it's become more naturalistic. Of course, you still have the larger than life pot boiler, which still has a market, which does really well. You just have to see Pushpa to see how that still works. But yeah, so like I was saying, that now you don't have that many lip sync songs, which we have all grown up seeing, and it seemed completely natural to us that people would burst into song in the middle of things. You don't have that too much, but I think, yeah, I mean, again, you can't generalize, because you have different genres. The big hits are still the massy, larger than life films, and then you have the slightly niche films as well, or you have the OTT releases. So I think they're all types of storytelling. Meghna?
I think you should never ask me about happy endings because I never did write about them. But I am finding in films, look, let's be realistic. People are coming to watch them for escapism, which is why we still have
Mm.
things like the actor and actress have to be beautiful and larger than life, and there have to be songs there, and or the whole song and dance routine still is around because it was a form of escapism, and people do enjoy happy endings, but not happy endings in that walking into the sunset kind of moment, which we identify with happy ending, but just a redemption of the character. I think when the character's narrative arc comes to a natural close, whether it is, what was it, NH7, NH10? What was that beautiful
NH10.
movie with NH10?
NH10 with
The redemption of the
Anushka.
character, right?
Yeah.
Anushka's, we felt so happy for the
Hmm.
character. For me, that was a happy ending, according to me. So I think that for me, the definition only of happy ending has completely changed because our sensibilities have changed. So when your story comes to a natural finish, when the character's arc comes to a natural close, when that all those conflicts have been resolved in a masterful manner, that for me is what defines a happy ending. But I have to say, when I'm writing for film, I keep that happy end in mind, and I make sure that my character gets it in whatever way suits the arc of the film. So I think I do very still strongly believe in it, because even when I watch films, I want to see the characters that I've invested so much emotion in, reach their happiest or best version of themselves for sure.
Yeah. You don't want to get depressed watching the films,
Yeah, you don't want to
watching
be
the
depressed. Yeah,
movies.
you want to feel empowered and enabled and
Yeah.
lifted higher.
So, as closing comments, I would ask both of you to give us some tips for viewers who want to move into screenwriting, who have written books, and are just trying to brave this world, this new domain. So, any comments, any points that you'd like to mention to them? Meghna, I'll
I
come to
think
you
first of
first.
all,
Firstly,
have a lot
I
of
always,
patience, right?
yeah.
You have to have a lot of patience. That's one thing I've really learned, that when a book is under development with a big studio, movies take time to gestate. On average 2 to 3 years, and I think it's increased during the pandemic. So I think patience is a skill that I have really learned after becoming a screenplay writer, because and also that people love entertainment with insight. So be smart about how you're writing your films for sure.
Naomi?
I think make sure you have another backup job for sure. Like have a day job, have another thing that you want to do. Don't let this consume you, because you still have to pay the bills. So these romantic notions of this writer struggling for 7 8 years and all, just do it as a side hustle to begin with, and like Meghna said, lots of hard work. Though I have to say, I don't want to sound completely pessimistic. Now is a good time to be a writer, because
Yeah, it is.
there's so much demand for content that people are
Yeah,
hungry for writers, and
yeah.
they're not that many writers. They are hungry for good writers. They are hungry for good content. They're hungry for fresh ideas. So if you have the patience and if you stick it through, you can definitely, and if you can tell a story well, things can happen.
Yeah. And I think,
Yeah.
people ask me a lot about this book to adaptation, because that's what's happened with me so far. So I would always say that book adaptations can lift the book, but it'll never diminish it. Right? For example, you think of movies like Guide or Namesake or Sat Khun Maaf or Omkara and Three Idiots, which have been actually sometimes even better than the books. Of course,
Yeah.
you always have examples like, for me at least, Slumdog Millionaire, Mistress of Spices, or even Atlas Shrugged, which a book I worship, did nothing for the books, but also they could at the same time not take away from the books being classics. So I think the one thing to keep in mind is that the visualization of the novel to a film has to remain the same, so that it translates well. And that itself is such a momentous task, because, like I mentioned, it asks for scores of people to be aligned to one common vision and to stay true to it. And this visualization of the audience and the director and the writer have to match, and only then it'll be a good film. And the only person who's capable of achieving this transformation is a good writer. So please, that's one thing in mind. Please, hone your skills, become a good writer, and only then enter this world. Because if you are a good writer and they're hungry for good voices, you'll really rise and you'll really shine.
And please pay writers more.
And please go beyond this, abla nari, bechari to, straight away
Yeah.
to bitch to krantikarari. Most women are kind of in between. So let's capture them and capture them
But
well.
but honestly, things are changing now, Deepshikha. Writers are getting great billings as well.
Yeah, they
So
are. And
and they're
great
getting
pay,
paid more.
honestly. They're getting paid
Yeah,
very
yeah,
well.
they are
Yeah.
getting paid more also. I was only talking about myself. So yeah.
Thank you both, Meghna and Naomi, joining us at Small Screen Fest, and it has been great chatting with you. And thank you again, and good luck with your books and work.
Thank you, Deepshika.
Thank